The council chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy, each one wearing their species' version of protective gear that gleamed under the bright lights overhead. And the air hummed with translated voices discussing the upcoming military exercise against pirate threats in the neutral zones, beyond civilized space Essex. Thor adjusted his heavy exoskeleton armor as he entered the chamber, his insectoid body encased in layers of reinforced plating that clicked with each step he took across the polished floor. And beside him walked Commander Velkara, whose reptilian form wore armored scales enhanced with energy shields that shimmered faintly around her massive frame. The two officers found their seats in the circular arrangement of benches that surrounded the central speaking platform where Council Speaker Thurin would address them all about the security briefing that had been marked as mandatory for every species sending forces to the joint exercise. Another tedious meeting. Velkara muttered through her translator device while settling her armored bulk onto the reinforced seat designed for heavy species like Hershix thorsisus. Compound eyes scanned the chamber and counted representatives from 47 different species, each one prepared for potential danger with protective equipment that ranged from simple energy barriers to full combat suits that could withstand plasma fire and kinetic strikes. The chamber doors opened again and Ambassador Gregory Walsh entered with Lieutenant Maya Collins walking beside him, both humans wearing nothing more than standard diplomatic uniforms that looked absurdly fragile compared to the armored masses surrounding them. Maya wore a simple black uniform with minimal plating across her shoulders and chest, the kind of light protection that might stop a glancing blow but would do nothing against serious weapons. And her only visible equipment consisted of a standard sidearm holstered at her hip. Thor leaned toward Velkara and spoke in a voice loud enough that nearby species could hear through their translators. Do the humans not understand the purpose of this meeting? Or are they simply unprepared for real combat situations? Several other representatives turned to look at the human delegation with expressions that ranged from concern to confusion, wondering if perhaps the newest members of the Galactic Council had misunderstood the briefing requirements. Ambassador Walsh guided Maya to their assigned seats while appearing completely unbothered by the stares and whispers that followed their entrance. And Maya herself walked with the relaxed confidence of someone heading to a casual gathering rather than a military security briefing. They wear no real armor. Another voice spoke up from across the chamber, belonging to a crystalline being whose body was encased in layers of hardened mineral plating. How do they expect to survive combat operations without proper protection? The murmuring grew louder as more species noticed the stark difference between human preparation and everyone else's approach to the meeting, and Zixter felt his concern growing because he had heard humans were intelligent. Despite their strange appearance, Maya took her seat and stretched her arms above her head in a gesture that made several nearby aliens flinch because her joints popped with audible cracks that sounded uncomfortably like breaking bones. And she seemed completely unconcerned by the noise her body made. Ambassador Walsh, Zixter called out across the chamber in a voice that demanded attention. I must question whether your species understands the dangers we will face during this exercise, because your officer appears to be wearing recreational clothing rather than combat armor. The chamber fell quiet as all eyes turned toward the human delegation, waiting to see how they would respond to this public challenge that questioned their competence and survival instincts. Maya Collins looked directly at Zixter with brown eyes that showed no fear or embarrassment. And then she did something that confused every alien in the room by laughing quietly while cracking her knuckles one at a time in a series of pops that made the crystalline being wince visibly. You asked a question, Maya said through the translation network that carried her words to everyone present. but I don't think you will understand the answer unless we show you." Ambassador Walsh stood and addressed the council with diplomatic grace that came from years of experience dealing with alien misconceptions about humanity. "Council members, I understand your concern for our safety, and I appreciate that you worry about our apparent lack of protection." Zichther clicked his mandibles together in confusion because the human diplomat seemed to be treating this serious matter as though it were a minor misunderstanding rather than a critical safety issue. However, Walsh continued while gesturing toward Maya, who remained seated and relaxed. "What appears to be weakness in human preparation is actually a fundamental difference in how our species approaches combat and survival." Velkara shifted in her seat, and her armor plates scraped against each other. "With respect, Ambassador, I have seen the physiology reports on humans, and your bodies are soft compared to most species here. Your skin tears easily, and your bones break under pressures that my people would barely notice." Maya stood up and walked to the center of the chamber without asking permission, moving with fluid grace that seemed almost casual despite the weight of dozens of alien stares following her every step. "You're right," Maya said while looking around at all the armored species surrounding her. "Human bodies are soft. We don't have natural armor plating like some of you. We don't have energy shields built into our biology. And we definitely don't have exoskeletons or crystalline shells." She paused and cracked her knuckles again. This time, deliberately and slowly, so everyone could hear each individual pop of her joints. "But we also don't need them." The chamber erupted in confused chatter as species tried to understand what the human officer meant by such a bold statement. And Zichther felt his concern shifting toward irritation because this seemed like dangerous arrogance. "Lieutenant Collins is our head of security," Walsh explained over the noise, "and she has volunteered to demonstrate why humans approach combat differently than most species in this council." Council Speaker Thurin finally spoke from his elevated platform, his ancient voice carrying authority that silenced the chamber instantly. "This is irregular, but if the humans wish to demonstrate their methods, I will allow it in the interest of interspecies understanding." Maya smiled, and the expression looked predatory in a way that made several species uncomfortable. "I just need access to your training facility and permission to show you what humans are really made of." Zichther exchanged glances with Velkara, who looked equally skeptical about whatever demonstration the humans planned. But curiosity won over doubt, because understanding human methods might prove valuable during the joint exercise. "Very well," Thurin declared. "We will reconvene in the combat simulation deck where Lieutenant Collins can show us why humans believe they need no armor." The council members rose from their seats and began filing toward the training facility, their armor clanking and humming with various technologies, while Maya walked alongside them wearing nothing but her simple uniform and that confident smile that suggested she knew something they did not. The combat simulation deck stretched out like a massive arena with walls made of reinforced materials that could withstand weapons fire from most species in the galaxy, and observation booths lined the upper levels where council members could watch training exercises from behind protective barriers. Maya Collins stood in the center of the arena floor while technicians prepared the simulation parameters, her uniform looking even more inadequate under the harsh training lights that illuminated every corner of the space below DR. Henry Porter joined Ambassador Walsh in the observation booth alongside Zichther and Velkara, carrying a medical kit that seemed unnecessary given the safety protocols built into council training systems. Your medical officer came prepared, Velkara observed while settling her armored form into a reinforced viewing seat. Does he expect Lieutenant Collins to be injured during a simple training simulation? Henry smiled and set his kit down carefully. I'm here to provide explanations more than treatment. Though Maya does have a habit of pushing herself harder than strictly necessary. The training master Quindo materialized in the center of the arena, his energy-based form glowing with soft blue light as he addressed the assembled observers. I have set the combat parameters to medium threat level, which should provide adequate challenge without risking serious harm to the participant. Maya stretched her arms and rolled her shoulders while Quindle explained the rules. And several observers noticed how flexible her joints seemed compared to species with more rigid body structures. The simulation will include combat drones using blunt force attacks, energy stun weapons, and mild chemical irritants. Quindle continued. Standard protocol requires participants to wear at least Class 2 protective gear for this difficulty level. She's wearing a uniform. Zixter clicked his mandibles in disapproval. This is foolish. She should withdraw and return with proper equipment. Maya looked up at the observation booth and gave a casual wave that somehow conveyed complete confidence. I'm ready whenever you are. Quindle flickered with what might have been concern in his species. Lieutenant, I must advise that proceeding without armor violates safety recommendations. Noted. Maya replied while drawing her sidearm and checking the charge. But I'm here to show everyone why humans don't follow those recommendations. The training master faded from the arena floor and reappeared in the observation booth, clearly washing his metaphorical hands of responsibility for what might happen. Next, warning lights flashed around the arena perimeter, and combat drones emerged from hidden panels in the walls. 6 machines that moved with mechanical precision while their sensors locked onto Maya's position. The first drone attacked with a sweeping arm that would have knocked most unarmored beings unconscious. But Maya ducked under it and came up inside the machine's reach, where she grabbed its limb and used its own momentum to redirect the attack into another drone. The impact sent both machines stumbling, and Maya moved immediately toward a third drone that had circled behind her position, her boots finding purchase on the arena floor as she pivoted and kicked hard enough to dent the drone's chassis. She's fast, Velkara admitted while leaning forward in her seat. But speed won't save her when those machines land a solid hit, as if responding to the prediction. A fourth drone caught Maya with a sweeping strike that connected with her ribs hard enough that the impact sound echoed through the observation booth. Every alien observer tensed, expecting to see the human crumple from broken bones or internal damage. But Maya rolled with the impact and came up firing her sidearm at the drone's sensor array. She took that hit directly. Zixter spoke with disbelief coloring his translated words. That should have fractured her ribcage. Dr. Porter watched calmly while making notes on his datapad. Human ribs are designed to flex and absorb impacts, and Maya's bone density is actually above average for our species. The fight continued, with Maya trading blows with the drones in ways that made the observers increasingly uncomfortable, because she wasn't avoiding damage so much as accepting it as part of her combat strategy. A drone fired an energy stun at close range, and Maya's left arm spasmed from the electrical discharge. But she switched her weapon to her right hand without breaking stride, and put 3 shots into the machine's power. Another drone caught her hand during a grappling exchange and bent her fingers back until the smallest one broke with a nan audible crack that made several species in the booth cry out in sympathetic pain. Maya hissed through her teeth and kicked the drone away, then grabbed her broken finger and yanked it straight while the observers watched in horror. What is she doing? The crystalline representative demanded. She needs immediate medical attention, not continued combat. Henry spoke without looking up from his notes. She's resetting the bone alignment so it heals properly. Humans have been doing field medicine on themselves for thousands of years. Maya wrapped her broken finger against its neighbor, using a strip torn from her uniform sleeve, creating a makeshift splint that would hold the bones in place. And then she picked up her sidearm again and continued fighting. The chemical irritant came next, a cloud of vapor that would cause severe respiratory distress in most oxygen-breathing species. And Maya charged directly through it while holding her breath. Eyes watered, and her exposed skin turned red from chemical burns. But she emerged from the cloud and tackled the drone hard enough to knock it over before putting her weapon against its sensor core and firing. "Impossible," Velkara whispered. "Those chemical agents should have incapacitated her immediately. Human respiratory systems evolved to filter out airborne toxins," Henry explained while watching Maya fight. "And our pain tolerance allows us to function through injuries that would disable most species." The final two drones coordinated their attack and caught Maya between them, one landing a solid hit to her shoulder, while the other's blade attachment opened a cut across. Her forearm blood ran down Maya's arm and dripped onto the arena floor, bright red against the gray surface, and she looked down at the wound with an expression of mild annoyance rather than panic. "She's bleeding." Zixter stated the obvious. The exercise should be stopped before she sustains permanent damage. Maya disabled one drone with a shot to its joint mechanism, and then used the damaged machine as a shield against the final attacker. Her bleeding arm still functioning despite the injury. That last drone fell after Maya performed a maneuver that involved jumping onto its back and firing down into its central processing unit. And then the simulation ended with warning lights changing to green silence, filled the observation booth as Maya stood among 6 disabled drones, breathing hard and bleeding from multiple cuts. A broken finger splintered with fabric and her uniform torn in several places. "Simulation complete," Quindle announced. Participants suffered multiple injuries, but completed all objectives within acceptable time parameters. Maya walked toward the exit door, waving off the medical drones that approached to scan her injuries. "I'll clean up in the medical bay. Thanks." The observers filed out of the booth and made their way down to the medical facility where Maya sat on an examination table while Henry cleaned her wounds with practiced efficiency. "You didn't have to break your finger," Henry commented while running a medical scanner over her hand. That was showing off. Maya grinned despite the pain from her various injuries. They needed to understand what humans can take. Zixter entered the medical bay with Velkara behind him, both looking at Maya with expressions that translated as profound confusion mixed with dawning respect. "I demand to examine the scans," Zixter said to Henry, "because what we witnessed should not be possible without cybernetic enhancement or genetic modification." Henry pulled up the medical imaging on a display screen that showed Maya's skeleton and internal structures in detail. "No modifications. Just standard human biology that evolved on a planet that tried very hard to kill us." The scan showed hairline fractures in 2 ribs that were already beginning to knit back together, the broken finger with bones aligned and healing, and multiple contusions that were fading as her body deployed its natural repair systems. "This healing speed is abnormal." Velkara studied the images with fascination. "My species would require days in medical tanks to recover from similar damage." Maya flexed her bandaged arm and winced slightly. "Give me a few hours, and I'll be ready for another round." The aliens exchanged looks that communicated something profound had shifted in their understanding of humans. And Zixter's mandibles clicked rapidly in what his species did when processing unexpected information. The medical bay's advanced scanners hummed while running continuous monitoring on Maya Collins, and the displays showed her body's healing processes working at speeds that fascinated every alien observer who stopped by to examine the readings. Dr. Henry Porter stood beside the examination table answering questions from a growing crowd of council medical staff who wanted to understand how human biology functions so differently from what they considered normal. "The bone density alone is remarkable," one avian doctor commented while studying the scans. Her skeleton could support nearly twice her body mass without structural failure. Henry nodded and pulled up comparative charts that showed human bones next to samples from other species. "Earth has higher gravity than most inhabited worlds, So humans evolved dense bones and strong connective tissue just to move around. Maya sat up on the table and rotated her splinted finger, testing the healing progress with movements that made several observers wince in sympathetic discomfort. "Does it not hurt?" asked a small amphibious being whose translator conveyed genuine curiosity. "The pain signals from that injury should be overwhelming." "It hurts," Maya admitted with a casual shrug. "But humans learn to function through pain because our evolutionary history required it for survival." Zixter had been studying the medical displays for nearly an hour, his compound eyes processing data, while his mind tried to reconcile what he had witnessed in the arena with what he thought he knew about species survival strategies. "I wish to understand more," Zixter announced to Henry. "Your medical scans show the physical capabilities, but I need context for why humans developed this way." Henry considered the request and then gestured toward the door. "Come with me to the archives. I'll show you what Earth is really like." The group made their way through the station corridors toward the central archives where Archivist Nimra maintained the councils, collected knowledge about every member species and their home. World's Nemra's telepathic form materialized as soft purple light when they entered her domain, and her mental voice touched each visitor's mind with gentle warmth. "Welcome. I sense you seek understanding about humanity. We need to see Earth's classification data," Zixter requested, "and any historical records about human development before they achieved space travel." The archivist's light pulsed with interest, and she began pulling files from the vast digital libraries that surrounded them, projecting information onto display screens that filled the air with text and images. "Earth is classified as a Class 9 death world," Nimra explained while images of Earth's various environments appeared. "One of only 12 planets in known space that combines multiple extreme conditions." Simultaneously, Velkara had followed the group and now studied the images with growing understanding. "I see predators in these forests, creatures that would be classified as apex hunters on most worlds. Humans evolved alongside those predators," Henry added while pointing to various animals in the images. "We weren't the strongest or fastest species on Earth, so we developed endurance and intelligence to survive." The display showed Earth's weather patterns: massive storms that could level cities, temperature extremes that range from burning deserts to frozen wastelands, and natural disasters that included earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. "No wonder their bones are dense," Zixter muttered. "Living on this planet would require bodies capable of withstanding constant physical stress." Nimra shifted the displays to show human evolutionary history. Images of early humans hunting animals much larger than themselves, developing tools and weapons, building shelters and eventually civilizations. "Look at this medical data from their pre-space era." The archivist directed attention to historical records. Humans regularly survived injuries that would be fatal to most species. The records showed case studies of humans who had survived falls from great heights, burns covering large portions of their bodies, blood loss that should have caused death, and infections that modern medicine would easily treat, but which humans had fought off through immune system responses alone. "Their immune systems are incredibly aggressive," Velkara read from one file. "Designed to fight off pathogens that evolved on a planet with billions of competing life forms." Henry pulled up another set of records that made Zixter's mandibles click in disbelief. "These are records of human recreational activities." The display showed boxing matches where humans deliberately struck each other until one could no longer continue. Mixed martial arts competitions that involved grappling and submissions. Rugby games where players collided at full speed. And extreme sports that seemed designed to cause injury. They hurt each other for entertainment? Zixter could not process this information in any framework that made sense. "This is deliberate self-harm. It's training," Maya had followed them to the archives and now stood looking at the displays. We test our limits and learn what our bodies can handle. Nimra brought up more recent records showing human military training programs. Soldiers running through obstacle courses that would hospitalize most species, enduring sleep deprivation and physical exhaustion that push their bodies to breaking points. Your species trains by breaking yourselves? Valkara asked with something close to horror in her translated voice. We train our soldiers to avoid injury, not to embrace it. Maya walked over to a display showing human history of warfare and tapped a screen. We had to learn to fight without modern technology. So we developed hand-to-hand combat systems and weapons that required close contact with enemies. The archive showed human soldiers throughout history, from ancient warriors with basic armor and weapons to modern military forces. And one common thread connected them all. They had always fought despite being vulnerable to injury. They chose not to wear heavy armor. Zixter realized while reading about human military tactics, because it would slow them down and limit their mobility. Henry nodded and brought up more data. Exactly. Humans learned that being fast and adaptable was more important than being protected, because we could heal from most injuries if we survived the initial trauma. The displays shifted to show human medical history. Surgery techniques developed over thousands of years. Treatments for wounds that other species would never survive long enough to receive. And documentation of humans recovering from injuries that should have been permanently disabling. I found records of something called a marathon. Valkara was reading through human cultural files. Humans run for over 40 kilometers without stopping. And they do this voluntarily. Some run further than that, Maya commented. Ultramarathons can go for hundreds of kilometers. Namra's telepathic presence conveyed fascination, mixed with concern. Your species pushes your bodies to extremes that most civilizations would consider dangerous or cruel. We push ourselves to know our limits, Maya explained. Because when real danger comes, we need to understand exactly how far we can go before we break. Zixter turned away from the displays and looked directly at Maya with his compound eyes. I begin to understand. You are not fragile beings who refuse to wear armor out of ignorance. No, Maya agreed. We're resilient beings who don't wear armor because it would limit what makes us effective. The archives continued displaying information about Earth and human biology, showing gravity measurements, atmospheric composition, evolutionary pressures, and the countless ways that humans had adapted to survive on a planet that seemed designed to kill them. Your skin is soft, but your bones are strong, Valkara summarized. Your bodies heal quickly, but you have high pain tolerance. You appear vulnerable, but you're actually built to absorb punishment and continue fighting. Henry smiled at the accuracy of her assessment. That's exactly right. Humans are what you might call internally armored. Our protection comes from what we're made of, rather than what we wear. Zixter processed this information and felt his entire understanding of human capability shifting. You are walking tanks disguised as soft creatures. That's one way to look at it. Maya cracked her knuckles again, the sound making Nemra's light flicker with discomfort. We just call it being human. The asteroid field stretched across space like a maze of rock and ice, each piece spinning slowly in the darkness while reflecting distant starlight. And somewhere within this chaos waited the simulated pirate stronghold that served as the target for the Joint Military Exercise Lieutenant. Maya Collins checked her gear one final time while floating in the zero-gravity staging area of the human transport ship. Her team assembled around her wearing the same minimal armor that had concerned. Council Observer's Corporal Jake Martinez secured his equipment harness and grinned at Maya. Ready to show these aliens how humans operate? Private Nicole Hayes finished loading medical supplies into her pack and joined the conversation. I just hope they're watching when things get interesting. The communication channel crackled with Commander Valkara's voice from the reptilian assault ship. All teams report readiness. We begin the insertion in 5 minutes. Maya activated her helmet's communication system. Human team ready. We'll take the fast approach through the asteroid field. Zixther's voice came through from the command ship. Orbiting above the exercise zone. Lieutenant Collins, please confirm you understand the mission parameters require reaching the Stronghold's core systems. Understood. Maya replied while pushing herself toward the airlock. We'll handle the infiltration while your armored forces keep the defenses busy. The exercise began with both teams launching from their ships simultaneously. But the differences in approach became obvious. Immediately as the heavy armored forces moved slowly and carefully between asteroids while the human team accelerated through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, Maya led her team through the field, using reaction jets and magnetic grapples, moving fast enough that several observers monitoring from the command ship expressed concern about collision risks. They're going to hit those asteroids, one observer worried aloud. But the humans twisted and turned through the field with practiced ease, using their flexible bodies to navigate spaces that armored soldiers could never pass. The pirate stronghold materialized ahead. A hollowed-out asteroid bristling with defensive weapons that tracked the approaching forces. And training drones began launching from hidden bays to intercept the attackers' Velikars. Armored reptilian forces formed a defensive wall and began trading fire with the drones, their heavy weapons and energy shields creating a light show that illuminated the surrounding asteroids. Were pinned down, Valkara reported. These defenses are stronger than anticipated. We need time to break through. Maya and her team used the distraction to approach the stronghold from an unexpected angle, coming in fast and low where the defensive weapons had limited firing arcs. Contact in 30 seconds. Jake called out while adjusting his trajectory. I see an entry point near the south pole of the asteroid. The team landed on the stronghold's surface with magnetic boots engaging to hold them against the rock. And Maya pulled out cutting tools to breach the hull plating defensive. Drones detected their presence and diverted from the main battle. 3 machines racing across the asteroid's surface toward the human infiltrators. We've got company, Nicole announced while drawing her weapon. 3 drones incoming fast. Maya continued cutting through the hull. Keep them off me for 20 more seconds. Jake and Nicole positioned themselves between Maya and the approaching drones, opening fire with weapons that seemed inadequate against the machine's armored shells. The first drone reached them and swung a heavy limb that caught Jake across the chest. The impact hard enough to crack his chest plate and send him tumbling across the asteroid's surface. Jake's down, Nicole called out while switching to armor-piercing rounds. He took a solid hit. Maya glanced back and saw Jake pushing himself up despite the damage to his armor. Stay down if you're hurt. I'm fine. Jake coughed and got back to his feet. Ribs are bruised, but nothing's broken. Continuing engagement, he rejoined the fight while holding his injured side, moving slower but still functioning. And his next shot took out the first drone's sensor array. Second drone tackled. Nicole and they went down together in a tangle of limbs and weapons. Rolling across the rough surface while she fought to break free, Maya finished cutting through the hull and kicked the section inward. Breach complete. I'm going in. We're right behind you. Nicole grunted while jamming her weapon into the drone's joint mechanism and firing until it stopped moving. Just give us a second. The third drone reached Maya as she entered the breach, catching her leg and pulling her back out into the open. And her helmet scraped against the rough edges of the cut hole. Maya twisted in the drone's grip and brought her cutting tool around to slice through its arm assembly, accepting the damage to her leg armor in exchange for disabling the machine's hold on her. Legs compromised, she reported while kicking the disabled drone away. Suit breach on my left calf. Losing pressure. Nicole grabbed emergency sealant from her pack and sprayed it across Maya's damaged suit section. That'll hold for the mission duration. But you need to move carefully. The three humans entered the Mayrathdamet stronghold through the breach and found themselves in a maintenance corridor that led deeper into the asteroid. And Jake took point despite his injured ribs. Command. This is Collins, Maya transmitted. We're inside the stronghold. Proceeding to core systems, Zixter's voice carried concern. We show casualties on your team. Do you require extraction? Negative, Maya replied while following Jake through the corridor. We're mission capable. Continuing insertion, the team moved through the stronghold's interior, encountering defense systems and training drones that tested their ability to fight in confined spaces. And each engagement resulted in more minor injuries. Nicole took shrapnel to her shoulder when a defensive turret exploded nearby, the fragments punching through her light armor and embedding in muscle tissue. I'm hit, she announced while pulling the larger pieces out with quick yanks. Nothing vital, treating myself. She sprayed medical sealant on the wounds while continuing to move, ignoring the pain in favor of maintaining mission tempo. And her hand shook slightly from adrenaline, but remained steady enough to work. Jake's ribs were bothering him more as they progressed, each breath bringing sharp pain that made him wince. But he pushed through and kept his weapon trained on potential threats. They reached a junction where the corridor split into 3 directions. And Maya checked her tactical display. Core systems should be down the center path. A group of training drones emerged from all 3 corridors simultaneously, surrounding the human team in a coordinated ambush that should have ended the infiltration. Contact all sides, Jake called out while opening fire. We're surrounded. Maya made a quick decision and charged directly into the center group of drones, using her momentum and zero gravity to bowl through them while firing at point-blank range. Her shoulder connected with the drone chassis hard enough that she felt something pop in her joint, and the sudden pain told her she had dislocated it. Shoulders out, she reported through gritted teeth while continuing to fire with her other arm. Need a second to reset it. Nicole and Jake held the other corridors while Maya braced herself against the wall and slammed her shoulder joint against a protruding pipe, the impact forcing the ball back into its socket with a sensation that made her vision blur. Reset complete, Maya gasped, shoulders functional but painful. Continuing mission. The team fought through the remaining drones and reached the core systems chamber, where they needed to upload a virus program to HFY twice. Complete the exercise objectives. Maya's hands flew across the control interface while Jake and Nicole held the entrance against reinforcements, and sweat ran down her face inside her helmet despite the cooling systems. Upload at 50%, she announced. Need another 30 seconds. A massive combat drone entered the chamber, larger than the ones they had faced before, and it immediately targeted Maya at the control console. Jake threw himself in the drone's path and took a blow meant for Maya, the impact sending him crashing into the wall hard enough that his helmet cracked and blood ran from a cut above his eye. Jake. Nicole moved to help him, but more drones were coming through the entrance. Stay with me, Marine. I'm okay, Jake mumbled while trying to focus his eyes. Probably have a concussion, but I'm okay. Maya finished the upload and the simulation ended with all systems powering down. Mission complete. Despite the human team's accumulated injuries, exercise complete, Zixter announced over the communication channel. All forces returned to staging areas for debriefing. The human team made their way back to their ship, moving slower now as adrenaline faded and pain caught up with them, each one nursing injuries that would have hospitalized most species. Vekara watched from her ship as the humans limped aboard their transport, and she opened a private channel to Maya. Your team is severely injured, yet you completed the objective while my forces remained engaged with the outer defenses. That's what humans do, Maya replied while medical staff began treating her team. We take the hits and keep moving forward. The council chambers filled with representatives who had watched the exercise from their command ships. And the atmosphere felt different than before, because now they looked at the human delegation with new understanding. Rather than concerned, Lieutenant Maya Collins sat in her assigned seat with her arm in a medical brace that supported her recently dislocated shoulder, and beside her Jake Martinez sported bandages across his forehead, while Nicole Hayes had her shoulder wrapped where shrapnel had been removed. Ambassador Gregory Walsh stood to address the council when Grand Speaker Thurin called the debriefing session to order, and the ancient being's presence commanded immediate silence from all assembled species. We have reviewed the exercise recordings, Thurin began, and we must acknowledge that the human team's performance exceeded all expectations, despite sustaining injuries that would have forced most species to withdraw. Zixter rose from his seat, and his exoskeleton armor gleamed under the chamber lights. I wish to formally apologize to the human delegation for my earlier comments questioning their competence and preparation. The chamber murmured with surprise because Zixter's species rarely admitted error publicly, and his mandibles clicked with genuine contrition as he continued speaking. I believe humans were foolish for refusing to wear proper armor, he said while looking directly at Maya. But I now understand that what I perceived as weakness was actually a fundamental difference in combat philosophy. Velkara stood as well, her massive reptilian form towering over most other representatives. I have studied the exercise recordings extensively, and I must request permission to ask Lieutenant Collins about human training methods. Maya nodded and stood despite the discomfort in her shoulder. I'm happy to answer any questions. Commander, your team sustained multiple serious injuries during the exercise, Velkara began. Yet each time someone was hurt, they treated themselves and continued fighting. How do you train soldiers to function through such trauma? Maya considered her response carefully. We train by understanding our limits, not by avoiding them. Humans spend years learning what our bodies can handle and how to push beyond what seems possible. She gestured to Jake, who grinned despite his bandages. Corporal Martinez took a hit that would have ended the mission for most soldiers, but he knew his injury was painful rather than disabling. I've had worse in training, Jake added casually. You learn to tell the difference between hurt and injured. And you keep fighting through hurt. Nicole raised her wrapped shoulder. Same principle applies to field medicine. We're taught to treat our own injuries, because waiting for help might mean mission failure. Dr. Henry Porter stood from his seat in the observer section. If I may add some context, human military training deliberately includes scenarios where soldiers sustain minor injuries and must continue operations. You train by hurting yourselves? Asked the crystalline representative. This seems counterproductive. It seems that way, Henry agreed. But humans who have experienced injury and recovered from it are better prepared mentally and physically for real combat situations. Zixter's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. So the armor you don't wear is replaced by armor you build inside yourselves through experience and adaptation. Exactly, Maya confirmed. We trust our biology and our training more than we trust external protection that might fail or limit our capabilities. Grand Speaker Thurin spoke with the weight of centuries in his voice. I have witnessed many species join this council over my long existence. But humans are unique in that your greatest strength appears at first to be your greatest weakness. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered this observation, and Maya felt the shift in how they regarded humanity. Lieutenant Collins, a voice spoke from across the chamber belonging to a floating gaseous being. During the exercise, you reset your own dislocated shoulder. Is this standard human capability? Most humans can perform basic field medicine on themselves, Maya explained. We learn anatomy and emergency treatment as part of our education, not just military training. Velkara leaned forward with obvious interest. I wish to make a formal request. Would you be willing to train some of my soldiers in human resilience techniques? Maya looked at Ambassador Walsh, who nodded approval. I would be honored to share human training methods, though I should warn you that your species might find our approach uncomfortable. I suspect that is precisely the point, Velkara replied. My soldiers are excellent warriors, but they rely too heavily on their armor. Learning to function without it could make them more adaptable. Other species began voicing similar requests, asking about human training programs and wondering if their own forces might benefit from learning human approaches to injury management and pain tolerance. Perhaps we have been thinking about protection incorrectly, Zixter observed. We focused on preventing injury, while humans focused on surviving and recovering from injury. Grand Speaker Thurin raised a limb for silence. This council must formally recognize that humanity represents a new category in our classification systems. The ancient being manipulated controls that brought up official council records. I propose we classify humans as a self-armored species, acknowledging that their biological capabilities provide protection equivalent to technological armor. The proposal went to immediate vote and passed with overwhelming support, and Maya felt a surge of pride as the council officially recognized what made humans unique. There is one more matter, Thurin continued. Given the demonstrated effectiveness of human methods, I recommend establishing a cross-species training program where humans can teach their techniques to other council forces. Ambassador Walsh stood and bowed slightly to the Grand Speaker. Earth would be honored to contribute to galactic defense through sharing our knowledge and experience. The session continued with discussions about implementing the training program, and Maya found herself answering detailed questions about human exercise routines, injury recovery protocols, and combat psychology when the formal debriefing finally ended. Maya gathered with her team in the Human Embassy's medical center where they could receive proper treatment for their accumulated injuries. That went better than expected, Jake commented while a medical scanner checked his ribs for fractures. I thought they'd call us crazy. They probably still think we're crazy. Nicole laughed while having her shoulder wounds properly cleaned. But now they respect the crazy. Velkara entered the medical center with several of her officers following behind, all of them watching the human treatment procedures with fascination. I wanted to observe your medical protocols, Velkara explained, and to ask when we might begin the training program you agreed to. Maya looked at her injured shoulder and then at her bandaged teammates. Give us about 3 days to heal up. Then we can start with basic pain management techniques. 3 days? One of Velkara's officers asked with disbelief. You sustained significant injuries during the exercise. Humans heal fast, Maya replied while flexing her fingers to test her shoulder mobility. And besides, teaching others will be good rehabilitation for us. Zixter appeared in the doorway with a medical scanner in his manipulator limbs. I have been researching human healing rates, and I must confirm the data seems almost impossible. Henry waved him over to look at the medical displays showing Jake's ribs. See how the bone tissue is already knitting back together. In 48 hours those fractures will be mostly healed. The aliens studied the scans with expressions that ranged from wonder to disbelief. And Maya realized that even after demonstrating human capabilities, there was still so much the galaxy didn't understand about her species. I have one question, Velkara said while watching Nicole's shoulder wounds being treated. When someone asked why humans don't wear armor, you laughed and cracked your knuckles. Why that specific response? Maya grinned and demonstrated the gesture again, her knuckles popping in sequence, because it's a very human thing to do. We make noise with our joints that sounds like breaking bones, and then we go do things that might actually break bones. It's a show of confidence, Jake added. Like saying we're not worried about getting hurt because we know we can handle it. Zixter's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. So, when a human cracks their knuckles, They are essentially announcing their willingness to accept pain. Something like that, Maya agreed. It's also just satisfying. Releases pressure in the joints. A young recruit from Velkara's team stepped forward nervously. Excuse me, Lieutenant Collins, but I wanted to ask why humans don't wear armor. Could you explain again? Maya looked at the recruit and saw genuine curiosity rather than judgment. And she smiled while standing up from the medical table despite her injuries. Let me show you, she said. And then she cracked her knuckles one at a time while the sound made several aliens flinch. That's why. The medical center filled with the kind of silence that comes from understanding finally clicking into place. And Maya knew that the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. We start training in 3 days, Maya announced to Velkara and her team. First lesson is learning to crack your knuckles properly. If your species has knuckles, and if we don't? Asked one of the reptilian officers. What then?